there was no reason to open the borders. There was no reason to welcome in 12 million. They did it intentionally. They did it intentionally to change the demography. Yes, I said that.
Hello, ladies. Hello, gentlemen. Welcome to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. I'm Jack Fowler, the host. You are here to get wisdom from the aforementioned Victor Davis Hanson, who is the Martin and Neely Anderson Senior Fellow at the Hoover Institution and the Wayne and Marcia Buskey Distinguished Fellow in History at Hillsdale College. We are recording on Monday, March 10th. This particular episode is up on March 11th. Victor's an apple a day. Victor's proving to us will keep the doctor away. He should have had that apple 5 or 6 days ago. He's going to tell us a little later about, I know many of you have missed the last two, what should have been the last two episodes. Victor was a little under the weather, so he and the great Sammy Wink were not able to record the two most recent podcasts, which means we have yet to hear Victor's take on Donald Trump's incredible speech to Congress a week ago. So we're going to get that. We're going to get Victor's take on the status of the Democrat Party, of Hakeem Jeffries, of Nicole Wallace. And Victor's got a great article. I hope we have time for that, on the fables related to the Ukraine-Russia war. And we'll get to all of this when we come back from these important messages. We are back with the Victor Davis Hanson Show. Victor, give us a little explanation of why you've been playing hooky from this podcast.
Well, I have to apologize. I haven't missed one since we started 3.5 years ago. I don't know what happened. I've had COVID a lot, but it's very hard, to go from a rural place to a rural place. So from my farm to the Fresno airport, to Dallas, to a connection to Detroit, and then 2 hours so to get to Hillsdale. It usually takes me 12 or 14 hours. And then it was a 40, I guess maybe 50. I left, it was 65 degrees, and I got there, it was 12 degrees. So I don't know. That was my grandmother always told me, change of weather. But I did a lot of stuff. I had a book signing and lecture and a video. Maybe that was it. But anyway, I came back and I was up. I think it was Wednesday morning. I got up at 3:30 in the morning. We took the shuttle at 4:45, got on the plane, got to SFO, picked up, did a whole day's work, went to an eye doctor appointment, felt fine, went to a dinner, felt fine. All ready for my big conference that I have to host, the Military History Working Group, on Friday. I wake up Thursday. I thought I was dead. I really did. I had 102 temperature, and pretty much I've been the same there all day, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and today, Monday, still sick. And at least I can sit up. And my wife was very ill. She's got it. And I got one of those little kits, the kind that say COVID, influenza A, influenza B. It's influenza A. Somebody's going to say, well, did you get a vaccination? No, I used to get them every year, and every year I'd get a flu vaccination. I get the flu. So this last 4 years, I haven't got one. Usually if I get the flu or something like it, or a bad cold, it's 2 or 3 days of hell and then maybe a week of being tired. But I've been in bed more debilitated with this than I was with the acute phases of COVID.
Yeah.
For some reason, it just knocked me out. I think the biggest problem is your eyes. You move them sideways and the muscles are achy. Anyway, I'll try my best today.
Well, your worst is better than everyone else's best. So, Victor, I was in the city.
Apple.
I know. Well,
Pierre Polyev.
Who is he?
Polyev. Sorry.
That's okay.
Pierre Polyev. I'm eating my apple.
Manja, doctor. So a week ago, Tuesday, I was in New York City, and I got back to Milford at nine at night, and I had not been able to see any of the much-awaited Donald Trump speech. And when I came to the house, my wife was watching Forensic Files, and I said, why isn't the speech on? And she says, well, I started watching it with all this lunacy and craziness. It was so disturbing. And so I changed the channel. I said, well, put it on. And I thought I was going to catch the end of the speech. Actually, I think I was just getting to the middle of it. There was another hour to go. It was
longest speech.
Oh my gosh, it was terrific. But I thought it was terrific. I thought it was really profound. Anyway, Victor, who cares what I think? What was your take on the speech?
Well, it was long, but I went back and looked at a lot of it. A lot of it was long because of the interruptions. If it had just been staccato quick, because there were all these things like Al Greene taking his cane like a crazy septuagenarian, reminded me of Tiresias or somebody, just screaming and yelling, and they had to escort him out, and then he was defiant. And then you had the women, the same dress in pink, and then you had the bingo card, little paddle, Elon's a thief. Here's a guy who's a thief, and he's trying to find out where $1 trillion of thievery went. Not all thievery, but a lot of it apparently is. And here the people who were protesting are the main beneficiaries of Act Blue, which is disintegrating before our eyes because everybody's fleeing it because they can't stand the scrutiny. It looks like that Act Blue, the Democratic PAC, was funding groups that were demonstrating outside of Teslas and stuff. So he had all of that disruption, and he said to them, there's nothing I can do to cure cancer. Anything I do, you're not going to like. And so he went through this counter-revolution on every aspect of the border. He had one great line. I thought the greatest was, he said, we were told that Biden couldn't secure the border because he needed new legislation. It turned out all we needed new was a new president. And that's what he did. He really put a lie to comprehensive immigration. That was always a lie that they used. And I guess one thing, when I listened to the speech, now you can see why they did it. There was no reason to open the borders. There was no reason to welcome in 12 million. They did it intentionally. They did it intentionally to change the demography. Yes, I said that. And anybody who says it, they said, oh, you're part of the Tucker Carlson Great Replacement Theory. No, you are. You're the demography is destiny and the new Democratic majority, and now you don't like it because nearly half of Hispanics voted for Trump. And now you're afraid that you're importing future Trump voters. So it was very comprehensive, and I think everybody should hold on because this is not 2017. He doesn't have Rex Tillerson and Jim Mattis and my friend H.R. McMaster and Bolton and Anonymous and John Kelly around him. And Bill Barr, nice people. But those people felt it was their duty to be a filter and to reinterpret MAGA directives and to change them if they didn't like them. These groups are MAGA enhancers. They come to Trump and say, here's what we can do on the border. Here's what we can do in defense. Here's what we can do at DOJ. Here's what we can do at the FBI. So it's a whole different world. And it's a revolution, that counter-revolution that's really picking up steam. The only worries that I have, that I wrote them in a long essay for the New Criterion, and I mentioned them before, is that we have never in the history of the United States been able to balance this type of deficits, but get a balanced budget with this much red ink by only cutting spending and cutting taxes to grow the economy. It's never happened before. And the theory is that if they cut taxes and they give incentives, they'll get more investment. But that's going to be a long-term process. It could take a year. But if you total up, no taxes on Social Security, no taxes on tips, no taxes on first responders has been mentioned. And then people saying there's no way that Elon Musk and Doge can get to 2 trillion. They'll be lucky to get to half a trillion. We could get still some big deficits. And then the same thing about the MAGA Jacksonian foreign policy. We don't want to get into other people's business and start wars, but he inherited a very dangerous world. So when Trump tells Gaza, you release the hostages or else, you release the hostages or else, release the hostages or else. Or he says to Putin, don't be bombing. He said that in November. Do not escalate. Putin, don't escalate. Or he says to Zelensky, we're going to cut you off, we're going to cut you off, He's got to come through on those threats. I think it would be better not to make them and just do stuff. I would just say if you really want to deal, and when Trump means you better release all of the hostages or else, what he's really saying is that somebody's going to have to go into those tunnels and get them, right? Or destroy all of the Hamas people. And from what you read, there's only about 20% of the tunnels have been destroyed. So that would be a gargantuan job, and it would be antithetical to MAGA philosophy of getting inside a never-ending war in the Middle East again after Afghanistan and Iraq. So he's got a lot of obstacles he has to be very careful about. I think people around him have to realize that we are in a cultural counter-revolution, and they're going to have to be very careful how they wage it, because they have the media, they have the popular culture, they have all the institutions against them. And he mentioned Canada and Mexico. As long as he stays on this one principle of reciprocity, we don't like tariffs. We do not issue tariffs against people who don't have tariffs on ours. We want everybody to have the same tariffs that we do. That's a very liberal position. Why are they angry? And the answer is, I guess, Canada, they've got this new Mark Carey, this new leader, Jack, and he's taken over from Trudeau. There's been no elections. These are supposedly how a parliamentary democracy works, by just appointing somebody to be the prime minister who was never elected. The only person who was elected as the head of the party was Trudeau. So, in any case, he's really taken a hardcore anti-Trump position and is going to square tariffs. But my question to the Canadians is, I agree with them that this 51 state stuff is silly. We don't want you, or you don't want to be part of us, and we don't want you to be part of us. Why would we want a country the size of California that bring in 2 more left-wing Senate seats and 50, because there's 41 million people, 52 House seats that would be all left-wing? And why would we want socialized medicine and all the stuff that you do? And your GDP is not commensurate with our GDP based on population, and more importantly, your per capita income is lower than Mississippi, our lowest of the 50 states. So we would like to tell Canada, I think Donald Trump doesn't need to get into the 50 Governor Trudeau. I know he's trolling them. Just say, we respect your sovereignty, and we're not persecuting. We're really not. But we're 36 trillion in debt. We're running almost $1 trillion in aggregate trade deficits. And you are our friends, and you're running now over $53 billion annual deficits. Mexico, 177. Why don't we just go down to 10 billion? That's all you have to do. Well, it's mostly you're buying our energy. No, it's not all that. You won't let in our timber. You won't let in our butter, our agriculture. We buy your electricity. We buy your gas. We buy your oil. So, and then, now they're starting to patrol the border some. That's not a big issue. Donald Trump said it was one of the sticking points. The real issue is twofold with Canada. Please treat us the way we treat you. And let's just have a small trade surplus. And 2, what happened to you, Canada? You used to have the 3rd greatest navy in the world. And D-Day, you had your own beach, Juno Beach. You had the 1st Canadian Army. It was a wonderful army. Why don't you, you're only spending 1.3% of your defense, your GDP on defense. You've violated the essential NATO promise. You've done it for 11 years. You've continuously not told the truth. Why don't you just spend 2%? In fact, you could coordinate with us. Let's map up an Iron Dome protection for North America from missile defense. You supply some of the natural resources, the energy, the bases. We supply the hardware. Or maybe if you don't want to build a Navy, build 20 or 30 icebreakers. And then you can patrol the Arctic Circle and keep the Chinese and the Russians out of our waters. But instead it's, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to spend that. You guys love war. That's what you do. We're not going to spend 2%. No way. And then, boulder smolder. Ooh, yeah, big deal. And then you don't understand. You're a big colossus. You don't know what it's like living next to the United States. We have to run a trade surplus. That's their attitude. And I know Donald Trump trolls them and they get angry at that. But when I listen to Trudeau or Carney or even Poilievre, they don't get it. That this is a new world. And then we looked to Mexico. They're making about $260 billion off of us. They got about 177 billion trade. They're the largest trade surplus of our partners, racking up, except for China now, Mexico. They are helping China get around all tariffs by having China send the stuff to them. They assemble the car or the TV, the cell phone, the computer, and then they go through basically tax-free to the United States, and then they get raw fentanyl. They're killing 70 to 100,000 Americans a year from fentanyl, and it's not just our fault, as people say. No, it's laced. They look at Ativan, Valium, opiates, methamphetamine, you name it, and they put fentanyl in it. And they kill a lot of Americans, and they make about $20 billion in smuggling fees and drug fees, the cartels. They make $177 billion in a trade surplus.
How's that all made Mexico a better country? All this money. Yeah.
Why doesn't Miss Scheinbaum, instead of trying to pose as the European-trained or American-trained Marxist, why doesn't she just look in the mirror and say, why did 40 million people leave this country and go? Europe said that in the 19th century. We can't feed you. You got a better chance in the United States. They never say that. Why did they leave Mexico? It's because of you guys. And you know why? Because it was a win-win-win-win from you. You got rid of your indigenous poor people that you don't, either for racist reasons or you just don't care. You wouldn't supply them with the social services they felt they could get in the United States. 2, you were counting on the $63 billion in remittances. 3, you were creating a huge expatriate community that was lobbying for you, 50 consulates in the United States. Or as Mr. Obrador said, I think it's a beautiful thing to have 40 million ex-Mexican citizens in the United States. So you had your expatriate community, and of course it was a Frederick Jackson Turner safety valve so that people would not march on Mexico City, they'd go north. So that was a win-win-win, and when you add it all up, $63 billion in remittances, and remember a lot of it's subsidized by us because most people who send the money back to Mexico to their families are here illegally, and most of them are on some sort of local, state, or federal health, education, housing, food subsidy. So 63 million remittances, 177 in food trade surpluses, 20 billion in cartels, $260 billion every 4 years, $1 trillion. And they don't even want to discuss it. And then Donald Trump, he has to say Gulf of America, and they get angry and angry and angry. But again, what is I don't understand their reasoning. It's sort of like, well, we're poor, so we deserve to go through your border. We deserve the remittances, 63 billion. You're lucky to have our people. We can run up a trade surplus because you're wealthier than we are. Well, why are we wealthy? You have one of the most natural wealthy country in the world. We're wealthy and you're not because you've got a socialist economic system and a completely corrupt judiciary and law enforcement and political system. But they never talk about that. And so I never thought we'd be in an argument with Canada, but then when I started to look at the trade surpluses and the continuing failure to spend 2% on defense, and then some of the rhetoric that's been coming out of Trudeau, it was inevitable.
Victor, about the MAGA enhancer, which you mentioned earlier, I see today's New York Post, again, we're recording on Monday the 10th, front page article has this creep at Columbia, this Malmad Kali is getting his green card revoked, and he's a Hamas campus troublemaker instigator. And then separately, Donald Trump's administration announced they're cutting $400 million in aid to Columbia University in Barnard because of their DEI and ongoing anti-Semitism practices. So I wonder if this would have happened in the first Trump administration. Would someone have taken these moves?
No, they would have never gotten away with this. Remember, after October 7th, they went right into pro-Hamas. It wasn't anti-Israel alone. It was pro-Hamas. And almost every immigration codicil, if you look at the law about green cards or student visas, it says that a guest here shall not be openly advocating or working on behalf of terrorist organization. Hamas is a U.S. declared terrorist organization. And remember those wonderful monuments in D.C. that were desecrated, and they had all the red, and they said Hamas on them. And these students know what they're doing. And again, it's that old Voltaire phrase, to encourage the others. All they have to, they will not have to deport all of these people, because they're just going to have to deport 10 or 20 of them. And then I spent 50 years in academia, and I can tell you there's two things that I learned. Number one, faculty are among the most timid, herd-like people in the world. If they think that it's cool to censor Scott Atlas and Jay Bhattacharya, then they fight with each other to get on record to do that. When they think that it's not cool to do that, and they have an NIH grant, and Jay is the arbiter of that, then they say, I never did it. I was always against it. So a lot of faculty were involved. If they see that people who are visiting professors, for example, and they have been advocating or out in these demonstrations and they're deported, it'll stop among the faculty. And students are herd-like at that age, and they just react to pressure, and they are bullies. When you watch those students go in there and they just scream and yell, and they scream at the NYPD, about gun, shoot yourself, and horrible things. And then you have this pathetic scene where the dean wanted to go to use her own restroom, and they mocked her, and then they finally let her go. It would be, I don't want to be too melodramatic, but a Napoleonic whiff of grape shot would have stopped the whole thing. I don't mean that literally. I just mean all you had to do was have one high-profile person, and then they just have to say, you violated the terms of your student visa or your green card. So we're going to give you your heart's desire. You get to go back to where you came from, and then you don't have to be here anymore in the great Satan. And I think that'll stop it. It's almost stopped it at Stanford University. We had a disruption of Larry Summers, but they weren't students. And I think everybody knows that if you're at Stanford and you camp out and more than 24 hours and you do the Hamas stuff, that for the first time in memory, there's going to be a statute enforced. And they know that, so they don't do it. It's all about deterrence. The same thing about the border. Tom Holman had a good point. He said, we're not going to have a problem. I remember he said that during the campaign. All we have to do is arrest a few hundred and show everybody we're business, and then these caravans will turn around. And now all he has to do is, if they can start deporting people, and say the following: if you get deported, you can never come in the United States again legally. That's it. You're on record. So we urge everybody who came in here illegally, who wants to be a resident or a citizen of the United States legally, go back home and wait in line like everybody else and apply. Because if we catch you, you're never, ever going to be able to have a green card or a student visa or come back in this country. And that would have a lot of self-deportations immediately. I think that's what they're going to do.
Yeah. Well, Victor, I wonder if a bunch of kids from Young America's Foundation or TPUSA sat in at, say, Oberlin College, what would happen to them? They'd be, their heinies would be kicked out in,
you know, it was funny you said that. In I'm going to get this completely straight, 1973? No. Yes, 1973, I was a second-year student at UC Santa Cruz. It was during the Cambodia, you're too young, but the bombing of Cambodia.
I remember.
And I was at UCSC, and they said there was going to be a student strike. And there was a 28-year-old guy in my class who had been in prison, believe it. He was on a special program to go to UC Santa Cruz. And I was from a farm, and there was a couple of guys from Modesto. And we were all kind of hung out. And it was a Greek history class. And sure enough, these guys came in, "We're shutting that down. How dare you hold a class?" And the professor was kind of, he's a nice guy, but he was not completely muscular, maybe put it that way. And so these little skinny Antifa type guys, even then, you know, spaghetti arms, nasal voice, screaming profanities, and they just started to come in and throw chairs, you know what I mean, at us. And it didn't take. This one guy grabbed a guy by the neck and he kicked him in the rear end, and he held his neck while he kept kicking him down the hallway. And then they all just, it was like they folded. Yeah, it was like a Western where the Indians are all attacking and the cavalry come and they just make a U-turn. They just made a U-turn like they were on horses and just ran back down. And then, as I remember, the professor didn't seem too happy with us, but that point is that these people are not formidable people, and they don't have a lot of courage, and they don't have they're not on the right side of history. They don't have a good proposal. They don't have a good ideology. The idea that you come into a foreign country and as guest, you start insulting and hurting people. And you know, the other thing is, if you just substituted Jews for blacks, just do that, everybody in your mind, or Hispanics. And then you had a group of people that were screaming, and they were deliberately going into black studies classes or La Raza studies classes and challenging the professor. And everybody makes fun of the Proud Boys and, you know, all those, or Oath Keepers. But just say if they were doing that, if they were going into a university and in very racist terms, trying to confront people who were black or Hispanic and disrupting their classes and calling these names and chasing them around camp, how long would it have been before James Comey or Andrew McCabe or Christopher Wray's FBI would have had them in jail, and then the DOJ would have had them in prison for 10 years? Not long. But with Jews, nobody cared. And that's what was so bad about it.
Well, Victor, we're going to keep a little bit on Trump's speech and some polls about it, some polls on Democrats, maybe Hakeem Jeffries, his standing in the party, and you can eat an apple, take a bite out of it, and we will be back from these important messages.
Did you know scammers can literally steal your home right out from under you? The FBI calls it house stealing, and it's a growing real estate scam targeting American homeowners. Here's how it works. Criminals forge your signature on one document and use a fake notary stamp, pay a small fee, and then file it at your local recorder's office. And just like that, your home title has been transferred from your name. Then they can take out loans using your equity as collateral or even sell the property behind your back. And you won't even know what's happening until you start receiving foreclosure or collection notices. So let me ask you, when was the last time you checked your home title? If you're like me, the answer to that is never. That's exactly what scammers are counting on, and that's why I trust Home Title Lock. Their $1 million triple lock protection helps keep your home and equity safe. Here's what you get: immediate 24/7 monitoring of your property, urgent alerts if there are any changes, and if fraud should happen, their U.S.-based restoration team will spend up to $1 million to fix the fraud and restore your title at no additional cost. And here's the best part. I've teamed up with Home Title Lock to give you a free title history report so you can find out if you've already been a victim, and access to your personal title expert, a $250 value just for signing up. Go to HometitleLock.com and use my promo code Victor250 or click on the link in the description. That's HometitleLock.com, promo code Victor250 to get the protection and peace of mind you deserve.
We are back with the Victor Davis Hanson Show, recording on March 10th. This episode is up on Tuesday, March 11th. Victor's got a website, The Blade of Perseus. VictorHanson.com's the address. $65 a year is what it costs to subscribe, discounted from $6.50 a month. Why would you want to do that? Because twice a week, Victor writes an original ultra piece for The Blade of Perseus, and he does an original video take on current events. So if you're a fan of Victor's writing, plus there's a ton more to see at the site. It's free, but do subscribe. You will regret not having done so already. So, Victor, here's a CBS News YouGov poll taken the day or two after Trump's speech. What was your take, America, on the speech? 77%. These numbers are like really incredible. 77% support his plan to cut government waste and spending. 77% back his immigration and border policies. 76% approved of the speech. 76% approved of removing the congressman who interrupted it. 74% said his speech was presidential. 73% support his stance on Russia and Ukraine. Victor, America loved what they saw Tuesday night.
They did. And if Donald Trump succeeds in this counter-revolution, I think he will, 40 to 50% is a gift he got. I wrote an article today about it, and it's from the lunatic left. Because when he was giving that speech, or when he gives any speech, and you see these reporters or the adversaries in Congress, it's amazing. They're just playing right into his hands. They're so obnoxious. They're so creepy. And did you see the Senate? There was two things that were the House women. They wore sort of kickboxing, mixed martial arts tights. Did you see that?
For the crazy video they did? Yeah.
Like this, AOC and Jasmine Crockett. What was that
Pick your
all
fighter.
about?
Well, I guess there's some TikTok-y kind of thing. Pick your fighter. I think it's based off some kid's game. I don't know if it's Pokemon or some Mutant Ninja Power Turtles. I'm not sure what it was. But yeah, it was performance art. That's what that is what their party is about, isn't it?
And did you see the senators? They were using the SHIT. This is all shit. And I just kept saying it. And I don't like it when Trump says it. But he doesn't say it like that. They just kept resonating. I thought, so that's the Senate version, and this is the House version, and then you've got the placards and this. What do you think you people are doing? And then you turn on television, and you think, you mentioned Nicole Wallace, so she's berating a little boy who's got cancer, who's supposedly being used by Donald Trump because he wants to signify that there's a new Secret Service that's empathetic, and there's a young kid in the United States whose dream was to be a Secret Service agent. It's come to his attention. He's had a brain tumor, and the father is there with him, and then you have Nicole Wallace and Rachel Maddow blasting him, and they wouldn't even stand up. They wouldn't even stand up to honor him. They didn't stand up for anybody almost. So, and then I don't know what the strategy is what I'm trying to say. It's just nihilism. If they were wise, they would get together and they said, this is the Democratic contract for America. And they would say, we are for Doge, but we want to cut, I don't know, more supervisors and less clerical workers, or we want to find places to find them jobs, or we want to cut this program or this, or we can work with you on the Defense Department, things they don't like. So they would have an alternate one, and they would try to find the issues with that poll, not their issues that poll 20% or 30, but 60, 70, 80, like Trump's issue. Or they would join Trump on the border. They would say, you see, what do you need, Donald Trump? And then they would take credit for it, try to hijack the credit and say, well, we worked with Donald Trump, kind of like Clinton did with Gingrich when he was willing to raise taxes for cuts. And then Clinton said, I balance the budget, not Gingrich. So they would try to hone in on Trump's, but they don't do any of that. It's just nihilist. And they don't have any other strategy, but their only strategy is Trump is a fascist. And then we had Chris Matthews, whom I know a little bit, and he thinks that, it can't be Hitler anymore. So I'll just give an exegesis on Mussolini. Yes, Chris, it's already been used. I'm sorry. I think General McCaffrey already said, and when he violated Article 88 back in 2020, he called Donald Trump, I'm pretty sure it was he that called him Mussolini. So you're late to the party again. Then you have James Carville. He's the raging Cajun. He's reinvented himself at 80, Jack, as the seer. He's wrong on everything. He said, Donald Trump's going to lose. He's just a big effing white whale. He's a big effing big fat boy. Kamala Harris is not my favorite. She's going to win. No, she lost. You were completely wrong about that. And then he sees a little bruise on Trump's on his right hand.
Yeah.
And he doesn't say to himself, if you were president and you give as many media appearances and interviews as he does, and you go to rallies, you probably shake in a month 5,000 or 6,000 hands. And you probably get a lot of muscle stress, torn tissue. I know that when I do a book signing, I can do 200, and every once in a while there's some guy who wants to, you know what I mean, shake your hand like a vice.
Like he's trying to get water out of a pump. Yeah.
Yeah, I've had that, and it hurts.
Yeah.
So if you've done 200 of them, well, that's nothing to what Trump does. So he sees the blotch, and then he diagnoses him as tertiary syphilitic. So Donald Trump is crazy, and he's a syphilitic. And okay, Mr. Carville, you have no medical knowledge. Why? That's like saying Joe Biden has syphilis, because according to his diagnosis, Trump is crazy and says crazy things. Well, then why is Biden acting that way? And he said, well, there was Stormy Daniels. Well, there was Tara Reid, too. So Joe Biden, it was no chorus boy. So that's the level of opposition that they have to Trump. Yeah. And it's pathetic.
Well, let me share a poll's results about the Democrats. I think this is from Politico, titled "Polls Show Dems Have Lost Their Way." Voters still have a sour view of Democrats 6 weeks after Republicans swept into Washington with control, according to a new poll. Plurality of voters, 40%, said the Democratic Party doesn't have any strategy whatsoever for responding to Trump, according to the survey by the liberal firm Blueprint that was first shared with Politico. Another 24% said Democrats have a game plan, but it's a bad one. And a paltry 10% said that the party has solid technique for dealing with Trump. And this is all coming from the Democrat outfits. survey. I think I want to layer onto that, Victor. The leadership is, maybe they're yearning for Nancy Pelosi. Their leadership is Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries. And Hakeem Jeffries has come out of this last week looking pretty bad. I'll just leave it. I'll shut up after this. A friend of mine called him on Mr. Moore on X, described him as a dollar store Obama. I think that's pretty...
Well, I mean, I don't think a nephew should suffer the sins of an uncle, but I followed very carefully the career of his uncle, Lionel Jeffries. And he was a Black Studies racist professor at San Jose State for years, and maybe 2 or 3 years.
Was he the Kwanzaa guy?
What?
Was he the Kwanzaa guy?
No, he was the ice people and sun people.
Okay,
and
sorry.
he even didn't think of that. He expropriated it from another scholar. But he was a big guy. He went after Mary Lefkowitz when she wrote Not Out of Africa. But his big theory was that Black people are much more sensitive because of their skin color and the sun, the nourishing value of sun from Africa, and the cold, mean, heartless, barbaric people from Northern Europe were ice people. And he was fired, I think, from NYU. I don't know if they gave him some money, and then he took it, and then he came back and he lost it. I don't know what it was, but he was a out and out, inveterate racist. And when Hakeem Jeffries was young, he was kind of bought in that for a while. So he was from a very radical background, and then everybody loved him because he was the, as you say, the dime store, dollar store Obama. He was very well-spoken, we were told. He's a young, handsome guy. And he was just a complete empty suit. He's just a complete... There has been 3 iconic interviews, I was thinking that right now, when 3 Democratic leaders were asked questions. And the first was Tim Walz. And they said he was talking about Nazis and fascists running the country. Of course, they always say that. And I don't know why the interviewers don't say to them, well, what Nazi? I need the name of the Nazi, and I need the fascist, and I need the evidence that he is a Nazi, instead of just saying Nazi's fascist, Nazi's fascist. I don't think that Chris Matthews knows anything about the biography of Mussolini. Nothing at all. And what fascism was, he just spouted off a bunch of stuff. But Tim Walz was asked, who leads the Democratic Party? Did you see him? The people. No, who's the leader? He couldn't answer. So then they asked Hakeem Jeffries about, well, the second one was Gavin Newsom. He had that Charlie Kirk interview. Now he has a podcast, and he's inviting so-called conservatives to debate him. And Charlie Kirk just said, how can your party vote overwhelmingly to let biological males destroy women's sports? And he said, that's not right. We got killed on that issue. And then Charlie just said, well, why don't you do something about it? Your state is refusing to abide by NCAA rules. And then Trump executive order. And he didn't say anything. So it was just empty verbiage. It was like, well, I know I have to say this because I'm trying to repackage and recalibrate myself to run for president, and that's a losing 80-20 issue. But on the other hand, if I sell out my base, I got the Antifa, BLM, Hamas group, and they'll swarm my house. So they'll hit me up and shout me down. So, and then I got the teachers unions and the federal employee unions, and I just don't want to do it. So I'll just sound off. And then when they asked Hakeem Jeffries about that, well, he just said, and they asked him specifically, what is your position about biological males going into locker rooms with young girls, underage girls who were changing from swimming or sports? We don't support sexual predation, sexual predators. What did that mean? Are you saying that the trans people that you're defending are sexual predators? he's just clueless, you know. And you look at Nancy Pelosi, you know, she just sits back there and goes, I did all of these dastardly things to get advantage from my party. I was willing to lie. I was willing to break the rules. I was willing to kick people off committees that had never been kicked off before, the minority nominations. I rigged the January 6th. Did everything I could for 20 years. And this guy comes in and he takes my place as minority leader, and he'll be the speaker, and he'll destroy everything I've done because he's a total incompetent. He's a Cory Booker 2.0.
Well, Chuck Schumer is degrading quickly also from the great man of politics he was supposed to be.
Yeah, he'll never get over. Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, you sowed the wind. You're going to reap the whirlwind. You won't know what hit you. And he never really got over that. Threatening 2 Supreme Court judges at the head of a mob outside the doors of the court. If anybody else had done that, if a Republican, if Ted Cruz had said that to, you know, Kagan or anybody, Kanji Brown, Kagan, you won't know what's going to hit you, with a bunch of crazy MAGA people outside the Supreme Court, you would have had the FBI arrest everybody in 2 seconds.
Victor, I want to pick up again on Nicole Wallace, if you don't mind, what she said in response to President Trump's speech. While she was saying her truly rancid thing, who was sitting there? Michael Steele and Jen Psaki, and they just sat there and didn't say peep, as far as I could see on any videos. And I'm of course more than embarrassed for Nicole Wallace, but much more so too for the former head of the Republican Party, Michael Steele.
I was never fond of him. I always thought he was a mediocrity and an opportunist. I think that was after the Obama election, and the Republican rhinos thought Rush Limbaugh is all through, that conservative wing is over with. It's the new Obama age. We need to get a black conservative version of Obama. And that's why Michael Steele was picked. But he had never had any success much higher. What was the highest office that he had run for? He ran
lieutenant governor. He ran for Senate in Maryland, and he lost. Yeah.
And was he a lieutenant governor?
Yes.
Yeah. But he never was governor, and he just was an opportunist. As soon as he saw that the media and where the money was to be on cable news was anti-Trump, he just flipped. And so there was even a worse thing where it was Michael Steele and the woman, African-American woman, Simone. You remember her, the heavy-set Simone Sanders? Is that her name? She was an advisor to Kamala Harris at one point. And they were bragging, especially Simone, about Elon Musk. They were cheering on the fact that his latest rocket blew up on the air. She was giggling, and then Michael Steele got a little embarrassed. He said, well, okay, I hear that's enough. And then he said, but this is a reminder, Elon, maybe you should go back to what you're good at and clean up your mess before you get out of town, get out of Doge. But the idea that a major person on a network anchor would start to celebrate and giggle the explosion of a rocket, especially when we're in the process of trying to use that type of technology and rocketry to save 3 people, who this week we learned one of them just basically said they abandoned us, that we had a SpaceX rocket and it was docked. We wanted to go home. We had complete confidence. And Biden didn't want to do it for political reasons, i.e., Musk had joined the Trump campaign and was funding anti-Biden, anti-Harris things in Pennsylvania, and he thought this would make Elon Musk look too good. So you can't get on that. So they were stuck there for, it's almost going to be a year, isn't it?
It's just beyond twisted that would happen.
That they would do that.
Yeah.
And it's pretty sick.
Well, Victor, let's get one more thought because want to get a little truncated today so you can recover. Don't want to wear you out totally. We want to get your thoughts about the Ukraine war and some of the fables you've written about. But before we do that, we can take a break. Any thought about the Al Green censure that only 10 Democrats voted for it? And I just think that the age of decorum is over. Maybe it's been over a while.
I've been in 3 different districts, because my farm here where I'm speaking from is on a tri-corner of 3 different congressional districts. Sometimes I was in Nunes, sometimes I was in David Valdeo, sometimes I was in Jim Costa's. I'm in Jim Costa's again. And I give him credit. He voted to censor as a Democrat. And there was only 10. And if you don't censor him for that, at some point, I don't know. I think they need to just get rid of all of these ethnic, racial essentialism caucuses. This is 65 years after the civil rights, and there are a lot of African-American conservatives. There's an increasing number of Hispanic conservatives. If they're going to keep these race-based caucuses, then they at least need to say they're left-wing. They can say the Socialist African-American Caucus, the Jacobin La Raza Caucus. But the idea that they're representing a community, it's not accurate. And to the degree it is accurate, it just divides people. So you have Bowman of the Black Caucus, and they all rallied around him. Remember, they censored him when he let off the fire alarm. Black Caucus protected him. And then you had same thing with Al Green, and everybody said it was racist. Al Green himself said it was racist. They were going after him. And so the problem is that anytime you get an exemption for any reason, ideology, gender, sexual orientation, ethnic background, nepotism, race. The problem with human nature is that once you tell somebody you can do what you want because your dad is the boss, or you can do what you want because your family's very wealthy, or you can do what you want because we're afraid to be called racist by you, or you can do what you want, or we're afraid that you'll say I'm homophobic, or you can do what you want, I'm afraid you'll call me misogynistic, then that person has got a blank check. And it doesn't help them any because there's no deterrence left. And so that's the same thing with Jasmine Crockett. She says to herself, well, Bowman's gone and the squad has kind of ran out of gas. AOC looks very lethargic lately, like she's been reaching early middle age or something. And is she married now, or she's engaged or something?
She's got a squeeze.
Yeah, her heart is not in it anymore. And Rashid Tlaib got a cause that 75% of Americans don't like, the pro-Hamas card. And Bowman has been kicked out, and this Jasmine Crockett from Texas thinks she's the new squad firebrand, and she says these ridiculous things and tries to get in a fight with Marjorie Taylor Greene back and forth. And all these caucuses just turn people off. They really do.
Yeah,
they really do.
Remember that the Hispanic, the Mexican American woman who won that special election on the Texas border.
Yes,
and I think she was not allowed into the Hispanic caucus, even though she was a Republican. You're right. They should brand themselves for what they really are.
I don't know what it means either in our multiracial society.
Well, they also have related foundations, Victor, which turn into, and we know how foundations are used now, to raise money and then to line pockets of friends. So these caucuses, like the Black Caucus has a Black Caucus Foundation, and it's become a racket on top of just being.
It has, but what makes you black? Or you have to use the one-drop rule from the old Confederacy?
Right.
Obama was, when Obama was 18, his name was Barry Soetoro, and he was considered an Indonesian dual citizen, I think, for a while. And he was He was half white and he was raised by white parents. And then he reasserted his other half, and changed his name or reverted to his original name. My point is that once you get into this racial essentialism, you have to have rules about what makes you a particular race. And so how many people in the Hispanic caucuses are not completely Mexican-American or Cuban? Or they're intermarried, they're maybe 1/4, 1/3, 1/8. And people say, well, Victor, it doesn't really matter. That's the point. It doesn't really matter how much you are of something. Unless you want to do what Elizabeth Warren, that identity is like gender, transgender. You can assert and create your own gender, right? And therefore you can be Pocahontas. You can say, I am Native American, and I want to be the first Native American professor of law at Harvard. And if you can say that I'm now trans and I was a man yesterday, today I'm a woman, then why can't Elizabeth Warren say, yesterday I was a Oklahoma lily white woman with blonde hair, and today I am Native American?
So it's high cheekbones, Victor. They win every time.
And then there's a cruel law, isn't there, of human nature and the laws of the universe that correct all this and cannot be tampered with by humans. And by that I mean no biological woman says, I'm transitioning to be a man and I want to compete in the Olympic discus competition. I am transitioning and I can, now that I am a complete biological man, and you people who use the word biological, it's wrong. I am male in any way and I'm going to go out for the NFL. Or I'm going to be a high school high jumper and break all the records and destroy men's records. Never, not one. Why is that? Why is that? And that's what they don't understand, that there's certain laws that say this. And the same thing it is with race. You can't just assert yourself and say that you're Native American. But my point is this on race. Why do you have people who do you have people who are light-skinned African Americans who claim they're not African Americans and they're white? We used to. It was called passing. There was a movie called Pinky. Remember that? And it was because we were in parts of this country racist. And if you were African American, that's what The Human Stain was about. Remember? With Anthony Hopkins. He was part black in that movie. He didn't even acknowledge it. But the point I'm making is people react to where the benefits are and where the opportunities are. So now it behooves you to accentuate, if you're of mixed heritage, that you are completely one race, because that means you are a part of the Marxist binary victim class and not the victimizer, which is reserved for white people. But 40 years ago, the so-called white class was where the privilege was. And so anybody wanted to naturally, if they could, would say they were white, and they masked their minority. I'm not justifying or defending any of this. I'm just saying that whatever the situation is where there is advantages, people make the necessary adjustments, whether it's gender, sexual orientation, or race, which makes the whole thing ridiculous. And if we could just say, you know what? You don't have to identify by your sexual orientation, your gender. You don't have to say I'm a Latina every time you take a class. You don't have to say, well, as a black man, or, you know what I mean? You just don't want to do that anymore. It's redundant. We don't need it anymore.
Yeah.
And I think the country is ready for that.
Amen, my friend. Well, we're going to come around the home stretch, the turn, whatever it is, final turn into the home stretch. I haven't been to a racetrack in a long time. You'll forgive me. And we're going to get your views, Victor, on this column you've written about hard truths behind Trump-Ukraine tales. We're going to do that when we come back from these final important messages. We're back with the Victor Davis Hanson Show, recording on March 10th. This shows up on the 11th. I'm here with the indestructible Victor Davis Hanson. I don't know if that's an attribute, Victor. I guess it is. What are the alternatives? Yeah, you wrote this column. This is your syndicated column. I'm looking at today's New York Post. I'm not sure if it's your syndicated column. Maybe they took it from Ultra. But anyway, you have 5 fables about the Ukraine war and Trump. And would you share 1 or 2 of these fables, Victor? Trade war, negotiating with Putin is selling out. That's one of the fables. Oh, yeah. How about that? Negotiating with Putin is selling out.
Who started the idea? Mike McFall, my colleague, has an article in The Atlantic about Putin. But who created and who appeased him and who didn't and all that? Who was the person who dreamed up the idea of Russian reset? If I remember, it was Barack Obama and his Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, and the people that were the ambassador to Russia and others. And why did they do this? Because they felt that cowboy George W. Bush had been too cruel and mean to Russia. And they were sensitive to Russia. And they knew that deep down inside Putin, he wanted to be a Western Eurocentric technocrat. And they were going to reset that now that Bush had sanctioned Putin for going into Ossetia and Georgia in 2008. So Obama came in and was like, well, I'm so charismatic that everybody loves me, and I can just charm Hillary, go over there and charm Vladimir and get a jacuzzi button out of some spa and push it. And then that'll be reset, and we'll just trash Bush for being hard on poor Vladimir. And that's what it was. And it was appeasement, appeasement, appeasement. And it had many manifestations, everybody. One of them was the Russians had been out of the Middle East for 40 years. Henry Kissinger got them out. He sabotaged them, and right after the Yom Kippur War in 74, early 74, he got the Egyptians as American clients. And they kicked out the Soviet, and the Soviets had nowhere to go. They had one client, Syria, but they couldn't even get it near there. They were impotent. And then in 2011, John Kerry, remember, asked the Soviet foreign minister if he could come in and help the United States deal with Bashar al-Assad's WMD. Remember? I think it was Susan Rice said, well, we got rid of it. Yeah, it's gone. The Russians came in, we invited them, and we both got rid of it. They didn't. He used it after that. But they were the ones that were bringing the Russians into the Middle East. They were the ones that were trashing Bush as being too hard on. And then we had the famous March 20th, 2012 in Seoul, South Korea. Obama's talking to then President Medvedev. He was the interim between Putin 1.0 and 2.0, and he said he thought no one was listening, so he was on a mic. This is hot now, so it was something similar, and he said, tell Vladimir that this is my last election, and if he'll give me space, he's got to give me space in my last election, and I'll be flexible on missile defense. Okay? My last election. And translated, that meant I will sell out U.S. plans with the Czech Republic and Poland to create a missile defense to protect us maybe from Middle East missiles, Iran, but also maybe Russia, if you tell him to stay within his borders and not try something like he did in Georgia, at least until I'm elected. After 2012, it's my last election. I need space. And so what happened? They both kept their bargain, everybody. We got rid of missile defense in Eastern Europe, and Putin did not invade until Obama was elected. And then 18 months later, he went right into Crimea, Donbass. That was reset. And there were other elements of reset from the Obama administration. One was not to sell Ukraine any offensive weapons. They had the worst of both worlds. They would not arm Ukraine to protect them from the Russians, but they interfered in the 2014 election I'm not saying that Viktor Yanukovych, whatever his name is, was not a Russian, pro-Russian. I mean, he obviously was, but they did help organize mass, they being Victoria Nuland, the Obama State Department. It's not a conspiracy theory. They did really want him out. And they were high-fiving. They got Viktor Poroshenko in there, and then eventually Zelensky. Well, that was Russian reset, and it was all based on the idea they could charm Vladimir Putin, and they were not right-wing, odious ogres like, and it blew up in their face. It blew up in their face. So then Trump came in, and first thing we know, they're impeaching him after the Mueller's Steele dossier, Russian collusion, and then it fails. They thought, what's next? Oh, we'll impeach him for a phone call. And Mr. Vindman, who now I think is an arms dealer, isn't he, Jack? He has a non-profit, and he facilitates arms transfers from the United States to his native land. He was the one that broke protocol, disclosed a classified call to Mr. Ciaramella and the so-called whistleblower, and we were off to the races with impeachment. But the point I'm making with all this is reset was a left-wing Obama-Clinton idea. Trump came in. I know he said all these things that he could get along and Putin liked him and all that, but you look at what he did, not what he said. He started giving them javelins. They did not go anywhere under Trump's tenure. They stayed within their borders. Why? Well, you can argue, but it was pretty much they thought Trump was crazy or unpredictable, and it was stupid to take a chance by going in again to Ukraine. He killed, I don't know what he killed, 200 or 300 of the Wagner group in Syria. They gave Trump a call and said, we're being attacked. And he said, get rid of them. Killed more Russians than anybody during the entire Cold War. And then he upped sanctions on the oligarchs, and he got out of the asymmetrical missile deal. There's that famous conversation where he's sitting across from the Eurocrats. Remember that, Jack, where he says, and you guys are really crazy. You're getting to a situation where one day you're going to be entirely dependent on Russian gas and energy. And they're going, look at him, look at Trump, look at that stupid American. He doesn't know anything about us. And then that's exactly what happened. He warned them not.
Thank you, Angela Merkel.
And that thing was that Donald Trump was the hardest on Russia of any of the last 4 administrations. And as far as dealing with Putin, you can't deal with Putin. You can't deal with Putin. You can't deal with Stalin. Stalin killed 20 million people. FDR said to Churchill at Yalta, I think you better let me talk. Stalin doesn't like you, Winston. He likes me, Uncle Joe. He likes me. So I'll deal with Uncle Joe. And the rest was history. Wasn't too good when what the deal that he figured out with Uncle Joe. We dealt with Nixon went to China and dealt with the biggest mass murder in the history of civilization. Mao Zedong, 70 million people killed. Franco he probably killed 30 or 40,000 in jails and detentions over his career, and we negotiated with him all during the Cold War, and even though he was not democratic, Spain became a NATO member. That was considered fine. After the fall of France, for a brief, naive moment, Churchill thought he didn't want to, but he let people, Halifax, talk to Mussolini. They thought Mussolini would cut him a deal. It happens all the time. And I won't even get into Castro. There were so many left-wing politicians have thought they could charm Fidel Castro into becoming our friend. So it's just absurd. It really is, what the left is saying right now. And I think he'll get a deal one way or the other. I think my only criticism of him was that I didn't mind him saying they're not going to be in NATO. They were never going to be in NATO, so why lie about it as if it's a card? But I would say that you've got to pressure both sides. And he allowed the left to say about Trump that he was pro-Putin and anti-Zelensky. And Putin now is killing more people than usual. He's accelerating because he thinks there's going to be a peace. So Trump has had to come out and say, I'm going to sanction you if you continue to do that. And that's good. As long as he pivots and tells Russia, if you think you're going to take advantage of my magnanimity, then you've got another thought coming. And I think he can get a deal once the Ukrainians realize that he's tough on Putin as well.
Well, you will find this column we've just been referring to on Victor's website, The Blade of Perseus, so I want to recommend folks check it out. Victor, I think we've tortured you enough today, but actually, if the last time we spoke, we end the show by reading comments that our listeners send in. One was about health. One was from a lady who liked the longer podcast because she exercises more while she's listening. And two people wrote similar, and I'm going to share them. And these are from The Blade of Perseus. By the way, folks who listen on Apple, and so many people do, you can rate the show 0 to 5 stars. Thousands of you have. Thank you. Victor's got a 4.9 out of 5. People leave comments. We read them too, and read them all the comments. Thanks for taking the time and effort to do that. So here are two comments, though, from your website. One's from John Wheeler, who writes, I thought I would report that I'm also on the VDH fitness bandwagon. The podcasts usually last about an hour and 10 minutes, so I've upped my time when I lift weights from 50 minutes to whenever Jack or Sammy or Victor say goodbye. I had the pleasure of meeting Victor at a Hillsdale function some years ago and have become an avid fan, listener, and reader of his books and columns, and he's keeping my 72-year-old body fit. Then the other is, Victor, you need a 72-year-old fit body. So
I'm a 71-year-old. Apparently, whatever I'm trying to do to get over the flu is not working.
Well, you better get to 72.
I need maybe he can give me an advice. How do you get over influenza A within 5 days?
So we got to find the patron saint of influenza. Then there's James Higgins, who writes, I haven't had a chance yet to see Victor's headwear on the video version of his podcast. I generally listen while I'm walking my dog. He's pokey, likes to frequently sit and watch for cars. I don't mind, because I'm listening to Victor, Jack, and Sammy. The longer the walk takes, the longer I can enjoy listening to Victor's judicious commentary, entertaining impersonations, and fascinating stories from his past. Thanks, Victor. Thanks, James. Thanks, John. Thank you. I want to thank folks who write me. I get a lot of emails now from folks who have taken the time and are enjoying Civil Thoughts. That's a free weekly email newsletter I write for the Center for Civil Society. It has 14 recommended readings, great pieces I've come across the previous week. Go to civilthoughts.com, sign up, free, no strings attached, not selling your name. So thanks for those who do that. Victor, you've survived.
I did. Thank you. Just one last comment about
influenza.
Impersonations.
Oh,
my father, when he tried to get us up when we were like 10 years old on the way to school, it was during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Then afterwards, everybody had remembered Kennedy. So he'd say two things. One was Dwight Eisenhower, who had said in 1960, get out and vote for Dick Nixon. He'd say that to us, to yell us, to get us awake. And the other one, he'd go, you can't have missiles in Cuba. You can't have missiles in Cuba. That was JFK.
Did your dad?
Do you remember he used to say Cuba?
Cuba, yeah. Cuba.
Okay, yeah.
All right, Victor, thanks.
Anyway.
Thanks, everybody. We'll be back with another episode of the Victor Davis Hanson Show. Bye-bye.